So this is a tweet that was getting passed around quite a bit, 8.7 million views, and it says, went to a fancy dinner in SF, San Francisco, and everybody went to Harvard or Stanford. You have these people, and they all look very similar, and they all have the same dead-eyed stare. More men than women. The women have sequestered themselves with the funny Indian guy, or perhaps he sequestered himself with them. And there's just a lot going on here. And my comment was that I much prefer the affirmative action regime to dead-eyed meritocracy or Striver University, if you want to say that. But I think I need to back up a little bit to explain where I'm coming from. First off, just the photo itself and the caption. We went to a fancy restaurant. I don't know if the word fancy is being used ironically there, maybe somewhat, but if how much you paid for the meal is what you want to talk about, you're just missing the point. You're cargo culting the price tag of this restaurant. And yes, restaurants are about food. And if you're paying a high price, it's about gourmet food. But what is a restaurant about? It's about talking with other people or going to an anniversary with your wife or going on a first date or meeting up with an old friend from high school you haven't seen in 20 years. It's about anything other than what you're paying. It just strikes me as the type of human being who commoditizes everything, even things that are meant to be social and lubricants to build friendships and so on. It's a very shallow person who talks in this way. And to add insult to injury, he listed the schools that everyone went to. So that's what they talked about. Did they share SAT scores? Was that the topic of conversation? Which corporation you're working for? You could call me jealous for reacting like this. Maybe so. But my primary emotion is really that of contempt. I couldn't imagine eating dinner with these dead-eyed humanoid voids of personality. It would be perhaps the most interminable state of affairs. And the fact that they're all going to Harvard is, I think, a huge problem. And I'll get into that.
Yeah, I mean, just the photo alone, something about this dinner just looks so sterile, like even without the caption. I don't know, maybe it's just they're all hitting you with the stare of people who've never been told by their mom that they're loved or something, Asian parenting is like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it looks so sterile. I think Lindy Man pointed out that like no one even has a drink, it's all just waters.
Yeah.
Just the immediate pointing out like, oh, it's a quote fancy restaurant. I mean, I'm sure this is an expensive place, but it just looks kind of vibeless and they look kind of dead. I can't imagine like what they're actually conversing about here.
It's not
Other,
even fancy now that I
yeah,
relook at it.
it doesn't look fancy to me. I'm sure it
Fancy
costs money.
restaurant is implies something French
Yeah,
and
yeah,
white tablecloths and
yeah,
French onion soup and maybe some escargot or something.
right.
And
This just
some
looks,
waiter who's somewhat charismatic and can,
yeah,
pronounce the menu correctly or something. This is
yeah.
not fancy.
It looks just vibeless. It looks
Yeah.
cold, and it just looks very SF to me. It's just this autistic ass dinner where they're gonna discuss, I don't know, what dumb AI company they work at.
Yeah. If you're going to be an elite, you have to be an actual elite and you have to rule. And saying that I strove harder than you did in the striving wars at a corporation or at a university or even in high school just doesn't cut it. Because at the end of the day, they genuinely are shallow and not even narcissistic.
It reminds me of the managerial state concept from Burnham and Samuel Francis. I'm curious what you think about that. I actually found a good summary of it, if I can read this real quick. So it says the managerial state concept, primarily associated with thinkers like James Burnham, and Samuel Francis describes a system of governance where power is concentrated in a technocratic, bureaucratic elite that manages society through large-scale institutions, which include government agencies, corporations, media, and educational systems. The technocratic rule is a class of professional managers, administrators, and experts, distinct from traditional political or economic elites, which hold significant control, and they prioritize efficiency and stability over democratic or ideological principles.
Yeah, the way I've always thought about it as well is that an agrarian elite owns something. They own the land and they more or less own the people on the land who might even be bound to it. So there's this physical property that is the basis of their ruling of the realm. The managerial elite is different in the sense that they don't fully own the corporation that they preside over. They are appointed to administer it. And in fact, no one really owns it. I mean, who owns Apple? I guess you could say the public. It's been divided up into a million little pieces in terms of equities, and everyone can own, half of 1% of it and trade it the next day on a derivative market and then buy it back. And so basically, the ownership principle, the physical quality of it has been abstracted into a million different pieces. And so no one is ultimately really in charge. I mean, I think it sort of even rhymes with Hans Hermann Hoppe's discussion in Democracy, the God That Failed, that at least people my age read in our 20s and we became right-wing libertarians. But in the sense that a king owns the land and the people, the realm, and thus has to take responsibility for it. If you're a bureaucrat or an elected official, you are at best renting this thing for a few years. And no one ever washes a rent car. No one ever really cleans a rent car. If you get into a accident with a rent car, you might not tell the rent car company if the damage isn't too noticeable. You just don't care because it's not yours. And a ruling family would want to pass this down, this car, let's say, in this example, down to their great, 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 great grandchildren. So they want to maintain it and improve it, et cetera. With a president or a bureaucrat or any sort of elected official, they're just driving the rent car for a bit. And, it gets dented. You put in the cheapo gasoline. Someone smokes a cigar in the back seat. Who cares? And I think that's really like fundamentally what Francis is getting at is that ownership has been abstracted and voting, political power has even been abstracted. We are sort of shareholders in a way, and we get paid dividends, if you want to call them that, either in welfare or in Social Security or Medicaid, Medicare, etc. But we don't really own anything. We're sort of like holding stock in this thing, this big economy called the United States, that's abstracted into a million different pieces. And there's just this disgust with the people in this photo. Who do you think you are? Who are you? Why should I listen to anything you say? You're just some annoying person who gets to work a half an hour early at the corporation year after year to get a raise. There's just something contemptible about them. They're not a good leadership class. Leadership classes have always evoked God or they've evoked pomp and circumstance. And they've either claimed a divine right to rule over you or they have dressed up in totally flamboyant ways, evoking military glory and wealth beyond wealth, or some sort of verve that can't be expressed, je ne sais quoi. And, the Prussians were very good at this.
I was just going to ask, does this relate to higher education in a way? Isn't the academy simply run by managerial midwits and not by academic geniuses who were, let's be honest, highly egotistical autists with extremely poor social skills? At least that's what they were in the past, who had a disinterest in orthodoxy and in pleasing people, but simply wanted to continue the unrelenting pursuit of truth.
I disagree with that, actually.
Okay.
I think
This was Ed Dutton's argument. So I'm curious what your critique of it is.
I think the universities have always been monasteries, and the universities have always been about justifying reigning power, whether that be religious and or political. And the fact that our universities originated as theological seminaries is quite telling in that regard, including Harvard. The unrelenting pursuit of truth, maybe that's giving universities a little bit too much credit. It's not that that hasn't taken place there. And it's not that some radical thought hasn't sprung out of universities, but maybe this is sort of the exception and not the rule. 99% of the university effort is geared towards a theological approach towards the current order, justifying it in terms of the hard sciences and research. Maybe there's a little more leeway there because it's not butting up against power quite directly.
There
So
was
you,
a time where it was avant-garde, though. I mean, Newton, the Enlightenment, there was a time where it was kicking with all of its cylinders. Um,
Newton was, fleeing the plague and working on his own. I was thinking of quantum physics or something, which is in the hard sciences genuinely radical and mind-boggling and has had immense consequence. And that actually was coming from the universities. I think there's a story that conservatives tell about the long march through the institutions that all of these leftists sort of kept their heads down and then went about overturning the social order. And I'm not sure I really see it that way. I don't think they would have been allowed to pursue leftism in the universities if the political elites didn't want them to do it.
it would be like being anti-Zionist, right? Today.
Right. Look what happens when you, even in a small way, go against power centers at a university. Even in the most benign, innocuous, defensible way, you vaguely criticize a genocide and occupation, and they deport you and fire and humiliate you. So that does not strike me as an institution that is geared towards the, unrelenting quest for truth.